Thank you for joining us on Idaho State of Mind, where we endeavor to educate the citizens of Idaho on the state of higher education. I'm Libby Howe. This is a production of Idaho State University, and we are proud that the majority of the show's content is created by ISU mass communication students. On today's show, we are taking a look at a type of injury that can change an athlete's life forever. This injury can seem almost invisible. An athlete may receive one and not even know it. Even a coach or a doctor may miss the signs. Even more shocking, this injury is sometimes ignored by athletes in order to stay in the game. We're talking about concussions. As many as 3.8 million sports-related or recreation-related concussions occur in the U.S. every year. What many student athletes overlook is the danger of multiple concussions leading to permanent, life-altering traumatic brain injuries. We'll be talking to the professionals about why it is so vital for everyone from athletes to coaches to parents to have the facts on this topic. These injuries often occur at sporting events. The game is going, the heat is on, and the competitive spirit is up. For young people ages 15 to 24 years old, sports are the second leading cause of traumatic brain injuries, only behind motor vehicle crashes. Idaho State of Mind Summer Geoch sat down with Katie Harker, a basketball player who deals with post-concussion syndrome. Summer joins us in the studio. Summer, how does timing and receiving more than one concussion play into this syndrome?
Libby, 86% of athletes that suffer concussion will have to deal with post-concussion syndrome in one way or another. If an athlete receives a concussion and they return to the game before completely healing, they might have to live with the consequences permanently. Young athletes who sustain a concussion are 3 times more likely to receive a second concussion. Katie Harker sustained 3 concussions, and now it's a permanent timeout from one of her greatest passions. 19-year-old Katie Harker had a basketball scholarship to a junior college in Rock Springs, Wyoming. While practicing, she and another teammate went for the ball at the same time, leaving Katie with her first head injury. She experienced vomiting, dizziness, and headaches.
My teammates were pretty wary of it, and so when I started talking the least bit funny, they're like, okay, you're done, go sit down. And so they were really good about it, because sometimes I wouldn't even realize what was like that I was feeling funny because I was playing.
Her second concussion was also during practice when she was playing point guard, and another teammate was driving against her and accidentally hit her head.
It's hard when you play basketball your whole life. It's hard to tell yourself to sit out. And so my coach was kind of like, you need to go sit down. So I'm glad that he enforced that, because I might have kept trying to push.
This time she experienced worse symptoms, and she waited a few weeks before returning. Her final concussion was when she dove for the ball to keep it in bounds and hit the wall next to it pretty hard, causing her head to start bleeding. Someone called the ambulance, and after that, she decided it would be best if she no longer played. Experts say that girls are much more susceptible to concussions in sports such as basketball, hockey, and soccer.
I'd like to say Katie's story is unique, but it isn't. There are a lot more athletes out there like Katie that are experiencing the long-term effects of concussion, years after they stop playing. Katie's pretty remarkable, though. From what I know of her, she's intent on figuring this whole thing out and healing from her injuries.
I used to be able to just kind of breeze by and get good grades and have to study much, and so I definitely have to put in a lot more time studying and make sure that I allot myself a lot of time to get stuff done, and then I have to rest a lot so I don't go out and do as much anymore. I try to rest as much as I can.
Katie now attends Utah State and is thinking about maybe going into coaching or neurological sociology.
But it's hard. It's what I love, and it's hard enough to be able to do it.
10% of all contact sport athletes sustain at least one concussion every year. The brain is made of soft tissue and is cushioned by blood and spinal fluid. When someone receives a blow to the head, the brain hits the bony surface of the skull, causing a change in how the brain functions. The brain can become bruised, tissues can be torn, and minor swelling can occur. Doctors say you can't always see the concussion, but those suffering from a concussion can feel one through dizziness, getting sick, headaches, ringing, slurred speech, or fatigue. Concussions can affect the rest of a person's life, just like Katie's. Get to know the signs of a concussion, and if you believe you, a friend, or family member have one, then seek help from a specialized brain injury physician.
Okay, thank you, Summer. Young athletes who suffer 3 or more concussions are at an increased risk of experiencing loss of consciousness, reduced ability to form new memories, and confusion. Did you know a mild concussion, if not managed properly, can actually lead to death? It's nothing to play with. ISU's Concussion Center helps identify if a student athlete has a concussion with a computer test. This center uses what's called immediate post-concussion assessment and cognitive testing, or the impact test, to determine if a concussion exists. They recommend that an athlete suspected of having a concussion take the test 24 to 48 hours after the collision. The test includes short-term memory and hand-eye coordination tests, among others. After students take the test, the center works with the athlete's physician to determine the best course of recovery. In some cases, the athlete may be referred to a neuropsychologist for more extensive testing. This service is free to all students as well as the community, but it is especially focused on athletes. The first line of defense against repeat concussions is informed coaches. Idaho State of Mind's Deanne Coffin hit the sidelines for the coach's perspective. She joins us in the studio. Deanne, do coaches understand just how serious this can be?
Libby, coaches and trainers have learned a lot over the years about concussions and how to handle them, and they are beginning to realize the seriousness of concussions.
Contact sports such as football come with high-risk injuries like concussions, and the coaches play a huge part in helping to ensure the safety of their players. Coaches and trainers have come a long way when it comes to dealing with concussions.
Well, I think it's been an evolution. You know, back when I played in 1997, which is kind of dating myself, you know, we broke out the smelling salts. You got back and played as long as you could say how many fingers you were holding up. And, you know, now, over the course of years, we found out that, hey, getting a blow to the head and getting knocked out or a concussion, it can be a lot more dangerous than you ever thought.
Coaches have a variety of resources and training to help them identify a concussion.
You know, we go out there, we make sure everything's fine, and we get them up, we get them on the sideline, you know, and I ask my questions, you know, where are you at, what's your name, you know, how this happened to you. Then we do the flashlight test. That's typically the most common way of diagnosing a concussion on the sideline, is flashing a little flashlight in their eyes.
Football isn't the only sport at risk for concussions. Sports like cheerleading and volleyball also have a chance for potential head injuries.
I'd say we get a concussion once a year in volleyball. I mean, it's probably a little more frequent than most people would think, but the bigger, faster, stronger your team is, the more heavily they're pursuing balls and going to the floor. Girls hit their head on the floor, they collide with each other, and from time to time they take a shot right in the face or the side of the head with a ball that could be hard enough to give them a slight concussion.
If a player shows signs of a concussion, the coaches or trainers should pull the athlete from the game or practice and evaluate that person.
I remember running off the field, and then next thing I remember, I'm sitting on the bench by myself, my helmet's not with me, and the game's still going on. So.
You know, I think they're erring more on the side of cautiousness. I don't think they're in a hurry to get a kid back on the field if something happens. You know, we're all about winning as coaches and things like that, but I think coaches have done a way better job lately of just realizing that, hey, the athlete comes first before winning, and making sure that you have a healthy kid out on the field and not just the best kid on the field.
One major difficulty for coaches is student athletes sometimes hide their concussion symptoms because they're afraid of being pulled from the game. Both parents and coaches can help alleviate this by stressing the severity of multiple concussions. Student athletes are encouraged to be forthcoming with any symptoms they're experiencing. They need to keep in perspective that one game is not worth permanent brain damage.
Very good point. Thanks a lot, Deanne. For more information on the signs and symptoms of concussion, you can go to our website at isu.edu/Idaho State of Mind. In the spring of 2010, Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, sent a letter to 44 U.S. governors that encouraged each official to fight for concussion legislation. Now, 30 states have the legislation, 2 have what's considered partial legislation, and 8 have none at all. Along with our neighbor Wyoming, Idaho's current laws are considered partial partial legislation. But what exactly does partial mean? Well, there are a few main tenets of what ideal concussion legislation looks like. First, a state must mandate educational outreach to coaches, parents, and athletes. Next, a state must mandate immediate removal from play. Further, it is suggested that legislation requires a health care provider who is trained in concussion management to give written clearance in order for the player to return to the field. Last, the state must have an acknowledgement form for parents to sign prior to their child participating in contact sports. This form should include information about concussion risk. One Idahoan has worked very hard to get that partial legislation in place, and she's continuing the fight to bring what is considered ideal concussion legislation to the state of Idaho. Her name is Dr. Carolyn Fari, and she joins us in the studio today. Dr. Fari, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Why is it so important to get that ideal legislation in Idaho?
Well, I think it comes right down to protecting the kids. You know, ideally we would have athletic trainers in all of our high schools and with all of our youth sport programs to take on this burden of identifying the injury and managing it appropriately. But unfortunately here in Idaho, you know, we are a rural state. We do have educational funding cuts, and getting athletic trainers in the schools is going to be a long-term process. So I guess the onus of pressure becomes the coaches. I mean, they are the ones that are going to need to identify these injuries, and parents need to get educated along the way too. You know, this isn't like your typical sprained ankle. It's not something that we can just suck it up and play through. This is a closed head injury that we cannot see, and that if we don't manage it appropriately, it can lead to lifelong catastrophic impairment or even death.
Why do you think people don't take it seriously? I've heard people say, it's just a concussion.
I think because we can't see it. You know, we look at somebody and we may try to look in their eyes and we try to see if they're behaving normally, and we trust them when they say, yeah, I'm feeling okay, I don't have a headache, I'm not nauseous, I haven't vomited or anything, I'm not sensitive to bright lights or loud noises, and we trust that to be true. So far, diagnostically, there's no real scan that we can do that looks at the cells of the brain and sees that injury. That's why we need to rely on these functional assessments like impact, so that we can see more of what the brain is doing behind what we can just see with our eyes. So I think that's one of the biggest things is it's not taken seriously because we can't see the injury.
The pain isn't stopping you from going forward.
And a lot of times we're guessing. You know, I think that there's been a misconception about what concussion is. There's been a negative stigma attached to the diagnosis of concussion for many years. You know, when you and I were a little bit younger and maybe playing basketball or what have you, the rules were a little bit different. Now with the research and the information that we have today, we know we have to be much more conservative with our approaches, even with those mild cases of concussion.
Now, some Idahoans are probably familiar with BSU football player Matt Kaiserman, who had to be sidelined permanently for his brain injuries. I know that he's been working with you, trying to educate people about that. We have an opportunity to hear Matt's stories from his own point of view. Let's take a look.
You know, it's every kid's dream to go to the NFL. It's every kid's dream to be that star athlete. And I was that at one time, and it's very difficult to let that go. Unfortunately, right at the end of fall camp, I received a very mundane hit. It wasn't anything hardly at all. It was a tap on the top of my helmet, really, and I could tell immediately that I wasn't right. You know, I was probably just ignorant of the subject. I didn't know. I didn't know the seriousness of it. Concussion was always something that you just kind of played through. You always got dinged. You always got your bell rung, so to speak. Football is a sport that toughness is rewarded above all else. I remember taking the concussion impact test, passing it, taking a stress test, and initially passing it. And then the next day, I started feeling symptoms again, a few slight headaches. I knew I wasn't right in the head, and it took a lot for me to just look at myself in the mirror and have the courage to go against the status quo of being tough, and to walk into the head trainer's office and sit down with him and have an emotional conversation with him and tell him, you know, I can't play, I'm not right, I don't feel right. That concussion ended up holding me out for over a month.
Really a gut-wrenching decision for a student athlete to make the choice to leave the game. What's kind of the criteria for whether or not an athlete should continue playing?
Well, first of all, if you're symptomatic, if the athlete is experiencing any one or more of those symptoms, no two athletes are going to experience a concussion the same way, so there's no one-size-fits-all approach. You need to go through the symptom scale checklist and assess the athlete on each of those symptoms individually. And then, just how they're behaving in classes. Are they concentrating normally? Are they behaving normally in classes? Are they eating right? Are they sleeping right? All of those things. If your kid just doesn't seem right, that's an indication that you might have something to be concerned with.
Okay. Now, we know that a concussion can kill someone. I mean, that's obviously the ultimate outcome. What are some other things that can happen if someone gets a concussion and it's not managed correctly? They go back into the game too quickly. There's a few levels of different things that can happen.
Right. Well, obviously we have what you all saw with Katie Harker. We have a lot of athletes like that who have experienced one or more concussions, and they're living with long time lingering effects, the depression, the mood swings, loss of inhibitions, impulse control, those kind of things. But we also have the not so subtle things. I think the thing that concerns me most as a researcher and as a clinician of concussion management is that, as Summer said, once a concussion is sustained, the athlete is 4 to 6 times more likely to sustain another. When we put that athlete in before that they are completely healed, before those cells of the brain are allowed to completely heal, we dispose them to a phenomenon called second impact syndrome. And what that is basically you sustain the second concussion on top of the symptoms of the first. The brain can literally explode inside the skull as a result of the rapid increase in intracranial pressure. So obviously that's fatal, and it's fatal more than 50% of the time. For those athletes who live through it, they live with long-term cognitive impairments.
So this is not something to play with. What advice would you give to coaches, really quickly? I
think that the most important thing for coaches is, 1, get educated, 2, create a culture in your sport program that accepts concussion as a significant injury, and you encourage those kids to be withheld from physical activity. Never return a player to play the same day as a concussion is sustained, and always follow up with appropriate medical care.
Okay, Dr. Carolyn Fari, thank you for coming in today, and thank you for your work on this. It's very important for people to know
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, student athletes are not the only ones at risk of a traumatic brain injury. Medical information groups estimate as many as 35,000 Idahoans, including children, the elderly, and war veterans, are living with a moderate to severe brain injury. Russell Spearman is director of Idaho's Traumatic Brain Injury Program, housed in the Institute of Rural Health at ISU's Meridian Health Science Center. He and his research team would like Idaho to set up a trust fund to assist TBI survivors and their families who have no other resources.
Well, we know nationally that there are 24 states that have trust funds. They are designed to provide gap financing for people with a traumatic brain injury. Typically, they're funded with fines or fees or surcharges associated with motor vehicle accidents.
Spearman and his team also created the Traumatic Brain Injury Virtual Program Center, a free resource service for individuals and families living with TBI. Go to www.idahotbi.org to find out more. And in other news, the KISU radio station at Idaho State University continues to make waves through eastern Idaho by providing news and talk shows featuring hosts from right here on the ISU campus. Idaho State of Mind Sean Forey gives us a look at what the station's all about.
This is KISU Pocatello and Idaho Falls on your FM dial at 91.1 and 91.3. Visit us at kisu.org.
Alternative music, political discussions, news updates, and weather, all just a piece of what KISU Radio offers its listeners. As the local NPR affiliate, KISU reaches throughout Pocatello and eastern Idaho, with its studio right here on the campus of Idaho State University.
Most of our loyal public radio listeners like us as a public radio station because of the variety of programming we have. We have a very eclectic mix of music programs and other kinds of programs as well.
Not only does KISU air a variety of national NPR programming, but they also offer opportunities for ISU students, faculty, staff, and the community.
A good friend of mine said that I have a face for radio. I'm not sure exactly how to take that.
Teeing Off, which began its second season in the fall of 2011, is a public affairs talk show that often features Idaho politicians.
But to provide a perspective that's national, but that people here, I live in Pocatello, so it's gives them a little bit more of not so much of an interest, but more of a context and perspective of someone that they know, talking with the people outside the area.
KISU offers many opportunities for ISU students to be a part of the station by getting involved in many ways. From hosting to producing and even to editing, their doors are always open to students. Reporting from the KISU radio station at Idaho State University, Sean Forey, Idaho State of Mind.
For anyone outside Eastern Idaho hoping to listen to KISU, you can listen for free on their website. A link can be found on our website at isu.edu/Idaho State of Mind. An $855,000 grant was awarded to ISU's Department of Geosciences for a program that teams ISU with the Idaho National Laboratory. This program focuses on using INL's newest terrestrial laser scanner, which captures 3D images of the Earth's surface. This technology, called LIDAR, uses laser impulses to capture data. This creates millions of data points that can be measured over several years, showing vegetation growth and Earth movements. This technology can also be used to find areas on existing dams and levees that have become worn, allowing repairs to be made at an exact point down to the very millimeter. We talk a lot on our show about the students who make a university possible. Today, we introduce you to one student that reached beyond the university walls to help out the surrounding community. Jen McMinn is a senior at ISU who spent her summer vacation up at Scout Mountain, just outside of Pocatello. Idaho State of Mind's Elaine Washam has her story.
I mean, I like to sit down and watch TV or movies, but doing that every day, it gets old. And I could be doing something to better a place.
Idaho State student Jen McMinn is a longtime Pocatello community member who likes to lend a hand.
I honestly think the only thing we have in this world is time, and if we can't use it productively, then we're kind of wasting it.
A few summers ago, McMinn was scanning the paper for something to do and came across an ad asking people to volunteer at Scout Mountain Campground. Vandals had entered the campground at night and set off all the fire extinguishers in each cabin, among other acts of vandalism. The site, already running off of volunteer hours, now needed extra help. McMinn and one friend came to the aid of the camp about a week later.
There's a lot to do up here. The first day that we came up, we only got one thing done because there was the two of us.
This motivated McMinn to invite fellow students and community members to volunteer with her once a week. She has even talked her ISU alumni father, Tim McMinn, into volunteering. The group, ranging from 2 to 10 people, helps remove fallen trees, paint, collect litter, and even mow the lawn. At Scout Mountain, Elaine Washam, Idaho State of Mind.
McMinn plans to continue organizing a group to volunteer once a week this coming summer. As the state-designated provider of health professions education, Idaho State University brings us Healthy State of Mind, a segment dedicated to all things health-related. Every 2 seconds, someone in the United States needs blood. The constant need for donated blood means almost any healthy person can help change a life by volunteering to donate. But there are some misconceptions about who can donate. One misconception is that people with tattoos can never donate. Well, in reality, those with tattoos are only temporarily deferred from donation for 12 months. You can find a link to other temporary deferral scenarios on our site. An appointment to donate blood takes roughly an hour and a half, which includes registration and a pre-donation interview. After the donation, refreshments are offered to help re-energize your body. There are some basic requirements to donate blood. A person must be at least 17 years old, weigh at least 110 pounds, and have overall good health. It has been found that 90% of people who die by suicide have an underlying mental health disorder or substance use disorder, or both. The Idaho Council on Suicide Prevention has created a new prevention plan designed around statistics like these. Called the Action Guide, the plan has 10 specific goals for Idaho communities. Some goals have already been met, like the suicide hotline. The main focus of the plan is providing accessible mental health and substance use care, but also to provide education for professionals working with at-risk people. The council developed the plan with support from the ISU Institute of Rural Health. Alfalfa sprouts are those healthy little plants that have become regulars on salad bars and in produce departments. But there are some health concerns when it comes to this little rooted plant. Dr. Linda Rankin joins us in the studio with some information about how you can make sprouts safer. Linda?
Libby, since 1996, there have been over 30 reported outbreaks of foodborne illness associated with different types of raw and lightly cooked sprouts. Most of these outbreaks were caused by Salmonella and E. coli. One way to protect yourself is to grow your own sprouts from certified organic seeds. Sprouting sprouts is easy to do and a fun activity for the kids. Find a large mason jar and add 1 tablespoon of seeds such as alfalfa, radish, or broccoli. Cover with water and secure a piece of cheesecloth or screen over the top of the jar and soak overnight. The next morning, drain the seeds and rinse thoroughly with cool water. Be sure and drain off all excess water. Continue to rinse twice a day, and in a couple days you'll have a jar full of sprouts. Always store sprouts in the refrigerator. Libby?
Thanks a lot, Linda. If you're interested in sprouting your own sprouts, look for certified organic seeds. They can often be found in your local health food store or your co-op. And that's all for this episode of Idaho State of Mind. Thank you for joining us from the campus of Idaho State University. I'm Libby Howe. We'll see you next time.